أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. دعاؤكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء، وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء، وخضع لها كل شيء، وذل لها كل شيء، وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء، وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء، وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء، وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء، وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء، وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء، وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء، وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس، يا نور يا قدوس، يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته، وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك، وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك، وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك، وأن توزعني شكرك، وأن تلهمني ذكراك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع، أن تسامحني وترحمني، وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا، وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته، وأنزل يا بك عند الشدائد حاجته، وعظما فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظما سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفيا مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك، ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا، ولا لقبائحي ساترا، ولا لشيء من عمل القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك. ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي، وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي، كم من قبيح سترته، وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلته، وكم من عثار وقيته، وكم من مكروه دفعته، وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي، وقصرت بي أعمالي، وقعدت بي أغلالي، وحبسني عن نفعي بعد آمالي، وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها، ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي. يا سيدي، فأسألك بعزتك ألا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي، ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري، ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي، ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي، وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي، من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري، من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري، والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي، أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي، ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي، فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء، فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك، وخالفت بعض أوامرك، فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك، وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا، مستغفرا منيبا، مقرا مذعنا معترفا. لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني، ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري، وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري، وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شدي وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، ورقة جلدي، ودقة عظمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد ما انطوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهجا به لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته، أو تبعدا من أدنيته، أو تشردا من آويته، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدة، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا، وبشكرك مادحا، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك. يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب. وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثوه، يسير بقاؤه، قصير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي، فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها أضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته؟ فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته، وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي، فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفاه؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رباه؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات، ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما. لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين. وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما. أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيته وبفضلك سترته وأن توفر حظي من كل خير تنزله أو إحسان تفضله أو بر تنشره أو رزق تبسطه أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستره يا ربي يا رب يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة، وبخدمتك موصولة، وأعمالي عندك مقبولة، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، قو على خدمتك جوارحي، واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأسرع إليك في المبادرين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرده، ومن كادني فكده، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك. وجد لي بجودك، واعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقلني عثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا، يا سريع الرضا، يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النقم يا نور المستوحشين في الظلم يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا.
Today let us remember the marhumin of our families, our community, and in particular the marhumin of the sponsors of today's program, Sister Nagin and Brother Iqbal Hassan, for your own deceased relatives and loved ones, and for the following marhumin: Sayyid Ali Haider, Saida Begum, Sajid Hassan, Sayyida Begum, Zamir Hassan, Zahra Naveed Haider, and for all other deceased mu'mineen and mu'minat, in particular ulama and shuhada of Islam. Let us recite Surah Al-Fatiha after salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Inshallah, in just a few moments we will begin the majlis to commemorate the martyrdom of Imam Muhammad Taqi al-Jawad alayhi salam.
Please recite a louder salawat. I request Taha Nabui to come and recite the Quran for Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا البلد ووالد وما ولد لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد أيحسب أن لن يقدر عليه أحد يقول أهلكت مالا لبدا أيحسب أن لم يره أحد ألم نجعل له عينين ولسانا وشفتين وهديناه النجدين فلا اقتحم العقبة وما أدراك ما العقبة فك رقبة أو إطعام في يوم ذي مسغبة يتيما ذا مقربة أو مسكينا ذا متربة ثم كان من الذين آمنوا وتواصوا بالصبر وتواصوا بالمرحمة أولئك أصحاب الميمنة والذين كفروا بآياتنا هم أصحاب المشأمة عليهم نار مؤصدة صدق الله العلي العظيم.
मौला तक़ी अलैहिस्सलाम की शान में चंद अशार मरसिए के चंद अशार हैं कि क़ैद हो के जो चले मदीना से तक़ी, क़ैद हो के जो चले शहर मदीना से तक़ी, ज़ालिमों को उठाइए डर राह में न रोके कोई, ले चले बांध के जंजीरों में जल्दी जल्दी, जद के रोज़े पे भी कहने की भी फुर्सत न मिली, दुश्मने जा हुई बेवजह खुदाई नाना, जुल्म तो देखिए उम्मत की दुहाई नाना। बर मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद सलवात। Now request Brother Ali Abbas to come and recite the So Salam Marsiya. Bar Muhammad wa Ale Muhammad Salawat.
Bar Muhammad wa Ale Muhammad Salawat. Presenting a nasheed for you with some stanzas also appropriate for the occasion of the martyrdom of Imam Muhammad Taqi alayhi salatu wassalam. Sallu ala Muhammad. So this salam starts from the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and then goes through till Imam Muhammad Taqi. The one who prayed while the others slept, and for those who laughed at him he wept. While others ate, he would feed and fast. How he sacrificed till he breathed his last. He only spoke the truth. They would call him Sadiq from his youth. He was trustworthy, noble and kind. He was mercy for mankind. He taught us justice, equality, and to live and preach humanity. And for our guidance till eternity, he has left Quran and his progeny. He was Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Muhammad, mercy upon mankind, teacher of all mankind. His grandson Sadiq was his kind. His students everywhere you'll find. In his first open university, he would teach fiqh, science and philosophy. He said, be content with what Allah gave, and the wealth that others have don't crave. Give up all desires that cannot be met, but your share in the hereafter you'll get. He said, Lord, have mercy on those eyes that belong to the one who upon us cries, and upon our mourners' beaten chest may the choicest blessings of Allah rest. He was Imam al-Sadiq, salawatullahi alayhi. Al-Sadiq, Hujjah upon mankind, teacher of all mankind. And then some stanzas for Imam Rada, Imam Muhammad Taqi's father. He was eighth in the line of nobility and renowned as a beacon of piety. And from Makkah, Medina to Khurasan, for the Arab, non-Arab, he is Sultan. He said, La ilaha illallah is the guarded fortress of Allah. But your loyalty to the Ahl Bayt is a prerequisite of your faith. There was no one save Allah he'd fear. He would ransom himself for a mother dear. Like a gentle friend, Anisun Nufus, like a radiant sun, Shamsu Shumus. He was Imam al-Rida, salawatullahi alayhi. Al-Rida, Hujjah upon mankind, teacher of all mankind. And his worthy Taqi al-Jawad, who was pious, generous, a proof of God. He became Imam at the age of 9, and till death he lived by the will divine. He said, a moment needs the Almighty's grace. Every good advice he should embrace. If he keeps a preacher inside the heart, then from faith he shall never grow apart. He said, true repentance is to first regret, and to seek forgiveness and to not forget. And then through your deeds you shall compensate, and do not repeat the sins you did commit. He prepared the Shia for the days to come, when the cloud of Ghaiba would veil the sun. He became a thorn in the oppressor's side. They would martyr him at just 25. He was Imam al-Taqi, salawatullahi alayhi. Al-Taqi, Hujjah upon mankind, teacher of all mankind. Hujjah upon mankind, teacher of all mankind. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
MashaAllah, Ali Bas, MashaAllah. Par Muhammad wa ala Muhammad salawat. I request Hujjatul Islam wal Muslimin Sayyid Sulaiman Hassan Apti to come and address the majlis. Par Muhammad wa ala Muhammad salawat.
صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أعوذ أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين المبعوث رحمة للعالمين شفيع المذنبين وحبيب قلوب الصادقين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On this final day of the month of Dhul Qa'dah, the 11th month of the Islamic calendar, we remember the martyrdom of our 9th Imam, Imam Muhammad ibn Ali al-Taqi al-Jawad alayhim as-salatu was-salam. Now, those of you who have looked at ahadith, the more common opinion among scholars and in our history is that Imam Muhammad Taqi was martyred at the end of the month of Dhul Qa'dah, on the final day of the month of Dhul Qa'dah. Normally in Islamic history, they would count the end of the month from the last day and not from the first day. So the last day of the month would not be referred to as the 29th day or the 30th day of the month, whatever the case might be, but it would be referred to as the last day of the month. The day before that would be referred to as the second last day of the month. And depending then on when the crescent was sighted, it might be that that last day would be day number 29, if it was sighted a day earlier, or it might be that it would be day number 30 if the crescent was not sighted, or if it was sighted on the eve of on the eve after the 30th day. So for this reason, sometimes it is reported that Imam Muhammad Taqi was martyred on the 29th of Dhul Qa'dah, and sometimes it is reported that he was martyred on the 30th of Dhul Qa'dah, because there is a lack of precision in recording those days, or we should say that the month sometimes alters in terms of the number of days. And so when we say the last day, that can cause a little bit of confusion. But the day is the same regardless of how it is recorded. The final day of the month of Dhul Qa'dah is the day of the martyrdom of our 9th Imam. And briefly today we will look at some of the lessons we learn from the life of our Imam and then some of the teachings of our Imam, to remember him and to honor him. There are a number of unique parts of the life of our 9th Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Taqi alayhi salam. One is that he was the first Imam to reach the Imamat at a very young age during his childhood. After him, his own son, our 10th Imam, Imam Ali al-Naqi al-Hadi, and then of course the Imam of our time, Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman, may Allah hasten his appearance. They also assumed the office of Imamat at a very young age during their childhood. But Imam Muhammad Taqi was the first of these Imams to become the Imam at that young an age. And this both created a number of questions for people and also had certain blessings for the life of the Shia and those Muslims who were followers of Ahlul Bayt. And this is perhaps the most important lesson that we can learn from the life of our ninth Imam and from the lives of all of our Ma'asumeen alayhimus salatu wassalam, which is that many times when something happens that goes against our expectation or against our plans, our first response is to say, "Oh God, why did you do this?" And then sometimes we start to have objections and suggestions that, you know, God, you could have done it that way, it would have been better. Why not just work out the same result through a different path, through a different series of events? Many people in our time, they have a series of questions that if there is war, if there is poverty, if there is injustice, if there are natural disasters, then how can God be just? Many of you, if you follow religious discussions, theological discussions, objections of atheists, and common questions that many of us also either have or had at one time in our life, this is a common question. All these bad things happen. If God is so merciful and all-powerful and all-knowing, can't He stop any bad thing from happening before it happens so people don't need to suffer? So tragedies don't need to take place? And yes, God can stop it. But before we answer the question, and there are very sophisticated and very enlightening answers, among which is that we only learn our spiritual potential and appreciate opportunities that we have when we have deprivation. The hardship and the trial, it has meaning and it has a benefit for our soul if we don't always have ease and comfort. Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam, he compares it to a tree. If a tree grows in very fertile soil that gets frequent rain, then in many cases that tree, it doesn't have deep roots because all the nourishment and all the water that it will need, it's available right at the surface. So the roots don't go deep, the bark does not become hard, and then the slightest storm comes and the tree falls over. And then there are those trees that grow in difficult land. And the Imam says that you will find that they are much more hardy, much more sturdy. Their roots are deeper, their skin is more tough and rugged, and they are able to withstand more tests because they are stronger. A human body and a human soul is the same way. So there are answers that all of those things that we consider bad, they have a wisdom. And that is why Allah has created the world with these tests for us as individuals and for us as humanity. But there is a more important and a more real answer to this question, which is, when do I have objections? It's possible to take the question and to answer it. As I just gave a very brief part of the answer, that those hardships, they have a benefit for us. But it's just as important, and maybe more important for us, to say, where did this question come from? If I trust that somebody has my best interest at heart, and if I trust their mercy, their wisdom, and their ability, then something might be difficult, but I don't question or object to what they advise me or what they prescribe for me. And if I have a physician who is treating me, and it's not just information I'm seeking, but maybe I want a second opinion, or maybe I'm reluctant to accept what they say. The reason is that I don't trust either the experience of that physician, or I don't trust that they have my best interest at heart. Maybe I think that they want to bill me for something, and they want to pay off their vacation home, or whatever the stereotype might be. Or I might trust their competence. But if I have full trust, then I might still have worries. I might still be nervous before the procedure, but I'm not going to object. I will ask for knowledge and information, but I will not say that if I don't understand, then I am going to reject you. So when we have all of these questions in society, that if I can't understand exactly what is the wisdom of this earthquake, if I can't understand exactly what is the wisdom of this war, if I can't understand what is the benefit of this seemingly bad thing that has happened in society or in history or in humanity, if I can't understand the wisdom, then I'm not going to believe in God. The problem is that we don't know what questions we should ask. It's not that we don't have sufficient answers. The solution to this question is not in the answer, but in recognizing that if God is all-knowing and all-powerful, and if His mercy encompasses all things, then I should never feel that I have enough standing to say, oh God, why did you send this tornado? Why did you create man and women with this much free will that they can do evil in the world? The very question is arrogance, because I am implying that somehow I will be able to understand God's logic. The greatest lesson that we can learn is that when something happens, we have not just the option, but the obligation. Not to say, why did God not do something else, as an objection, but rather to say, oh God, if this is what you have done, if this is what you have decreed, what is the wisdom? What is the benefit? And then to seek that benefit, and to seek what is our obligation, what is our responsibility with that reality that God has created. So imagine now our 8th Imam, Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida alayhi salatu wassalam. He has reached the age of 47 years of age, a time by which most people, they have established their families. Some people now, they're looking forward by that age to being grandparents, or at the very least they're looking for their children now to get established and to get married and reach their own adult responsibilities. And our Imam has not been blessed by any child. Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida alayhi salatu wasalam, until the age of 47, does not have any children. And there was a big fitna after the death of our 7th Imam, where some people rejected the imamat of our 8th Imam. And they were known as the Waqifa. a group that existed in history. They died out when people realized that there was no truth to their claims. They denied the imamat of our 8th Imam. In the beginning, many people, they were confused. But then when they met Imam Rida alayhi salam, they heard our 8th Imam's answers to questions. They saw what he was calling them towards, what his teachings were, what his character was. And then they saw who were the people denying Imam Rida. In the very first few years after the imamat of the 8th Imam, many people, they accepted his imamat even if they had been confused before. It took years because communication was not instant. If I lived in Khurasan or even in Kufa and I didn't know what was going on, then for me to get to Medina, it might take months or maybe years of preparation. And then I would be able to go and I would be able to find out what is going on. But here is something interesting. Imam Ali Rida was an imam present in society. Those opposed to his imamat would have entirely died out, but for one thing. People came to Imam Rida, they asked him questions, he gave them answers which were just like the answers given by the imams before him. He answered their legal questions, he answered their theological questions, he gave them guidance on the true meaning of the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet. Nobody would have remained who rejected Imam Rida but for one thing. And this is why the Waqifi fitna stayed. People said, but you don't have a son. And every Imam has a son or has an heir. And people would come to Imam Rida with the ahadith found from Imam Rida's own ancestors. And they would say, well, you can't be the Imam because you don't have an heir, as every Imam must have an heir. There were ahadith circulating among the believers that after Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, 2 brothers, no 2 Imams will be brothers. Every next Imam will be the son of the previous Imam. So now we might, if it were me, I would say, oh Allah, this community of believers was protected, was guided by the Imams with such difficulty. Their enemies are always at the doorstep, ready to kill them, ready to arrest them. They have to live their life in taqiyya, hiding their true loyalty and their identity, because to believe and to love Ahlul Bayt is considered a capital offense. It means you're worthy of being killed. And now with difficulty, Imam Rida alayhi salam has guided people and answered their questions, and you are making it difficult for people to accept him because you have withheld a son. And it becomes even more confusing if we know, and Allah knew, that Imam Rida alayhi salam was going to be martyred at the age of 55. If his son had been born early, not only would it have answered a common objection and eliminated that false belief of the Waqifah, but also it would have meant that Imam Jawad would not have to be the Imam at the age of 8. If he had been born 10 years early when the Imam was 37, then Imam Jawad would have been the Imam at the age of 18. And that would have been much more easy for people to accept. Nobody would have objected and said, how can an Imam be so young? So you see, it seems very clear cut. If Allah had appointed us to His advisory council, the jury wouldn't have taken 10 minutes to reach a decision. Oh Allah, Imam Muhammad Taqi should be born sooner. End the fitna, solve the problem of who is the Imam, and everything will be great. But what did that delay do? And every delay, and every setback, and every hardship that I or you face in our life also has some wisdom. But sometimes you don't see it the same night. Sometimes it takes years, and sometimes it might take decades or even generations for that wisdom to become clear. Sometimes we might not appreciate it until the hereafter, but we have to trust in Allah. What did that delay do? Well, the Waqifah, they had one claim, that the Imam is in ghaibah. Because they didn't have actually anybody who was qualified to stand next to Imam Ali Rida alayhi salam and answer people's questions and give them guidance. So they said Imam Musa Kadhim, he is still alive and he's in ghaibah. And those ahadith which many people had not heard of, they were there in our books from Imam Ali, from our previous Imams, even from the Prophet, that the final Imam will have a ghaibah. But because people had not experienced it, you know how sometimes there are verses of the Quran, even those of us who have read the Quran, we read the verse, we say, as if I had never read it before. And the Quran is not a hidden book, but sometimes the verses are hidden. Many ahadith, they were there, but they were hidden. The fact that Allah delayed the birth of Imam Muhammad Taqi and allowed the Waqifah to continue their preaching and their teaching means that those ahadith about the ghaibah of the last Imam, which were hidden in our books, they became prominent and everyone began to debate. That the Imam is supposed to have a ghaibah. They would say it is Imam Musa Kadhim. And Imam Ali Rida did not deny those ahadith, but he would inform the people that yes, this hadith which is circulating, which the Waqifah are using is true. But Allah will grant me an heir and there will be an Imam after me. And those ahadith are true, the time will come. My horizon would have been, Allah, don't let these people spread that falsehood. But through their effort to squelch the truth, Allah allowed the truth to spread and to become clear for those who otherwise might never have heard about the ghaibah. In the time of our 12th Imam, the oppression of the government was at its peak. The paranoia and the fear of our government was at its peak. At that time, if the students and the followers of Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam, sallu ala Muhammad, were to be the first ones to say that we have a hadith about the ghaibah, you know what people would have said? They would have said, oh, you hit a dead end? And now you're just looking for a hadith, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel to try to justify your teachings and the fact that your Imam does not have a son who is visible. But all of those people who would have objected to the Shia and the Fuqaha and the students of Imam Hassan Askari using these ahadith 80 years before, after the death of Imam Musa Kadhim, during the time of Imam Rida and the time of Imam Jawad, they had already said, we accept these ahadith. And so Allah had sealed the proof of our Imam 80 years before he was born. Was it a test or was it a blessing? Was it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala delayed something that should have been brought forward? Or by delaying it, did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give a mercy to the believers at that time and for all time until our own time today? And many other things which we don't have time to talk about, like the fact that having an Imam who was 8 years old. And yet, Ma'mun, the Caliph, who was not a friend of Ahlul Bayt, was compelled to admit that even his most eminent jurist, Yahya ibn Aktham, could not hold a candle to Imam Muhammad Taqi in his youth. And then look at what words of praise the scholars who were not Shia gave about Imam Muhammad Taqi. That tells us that there were many other blessings as well that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave in this life of our 9th Imam. He became Imam at the age of 8. and he remained Imam for about 17 years. Another of the unique things of our 9th Imam is that he was the youngest at the time of his death and martyrdom. Only approximately 25 years of age and a few months. The teachings of our Imam, they are a reminder of the necessity of striving in the path of Allah, regardless of what circumstances we live in. Sometimes we feel like the trials and the struggles that we have today, they never existed before. Sometimes when our parents tell us to do something, we say, but you don't know what it's like to be a kid today. And yes, they don't know what it's like to be a kid today. Certain things have changed. But if many things have changed, the basic human struggle has not changed. Because the human soul is created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the basic struggle and the basic question of every soul is, do we want to be obedient to God or do we want to be disobedient? Much changes with technology, with culture, with the times. But much more also remains the same. And that is why the wisdom of the Quran and the wisdom of Ahlul Bayt is timeless. It doesn't have an expiration date. So sometimes we feel like our circumstances are unique and therefore we refuse to even look for guidance to those teachings and those models which, although they are not 100% the same as our time and our circumstances, they still have a source of inspiration and guidance for our spiritual life. And our 9th Imam, he lived in a time when oppression had come, not just in society, but even within the home. The wife of our Imam was the daughter of the Caliph Ma'mun, and she was his enemy. Her brother, the son of Ma'mun, Ja'far ibn Ma'mun, and the Caliph at the time, Mu'tasim, the other son of Ma'mun, they were the two brothers-in-law of our 9th Imam. And they would scheme and try to find ways either to bring down the honor of the Imam, which they never succeeded in doing, in spite of the millions of dinars that they could spend and the soldiers at their disposal. And then they schemed to extinguish the life of the Imam, which, like all of our Imams before him, he also died the death of a martyr. Our Imam lived in a time when the source of temptation and the source of evil was within the home. It was a different form than our time. But the Imam, he gave us certain principles, and I will just mention a few of the ahadith. One is, the Imam says, لا يغرك سخط من رضاه الجور. A lot of times we make mistakes in our lives and our decisions because we want to make other people happy. Many people, they object to the advice of their parents because they say, I'm my own person. You can't tell me how to dress, how to talk, what to study, how to live. But then, in becoming their own person, it looks like they are taking their model almost without any thinking and any adaptation from social media or from their friends or from their peers. A mass-produced fashion, mass-produced entertainment, mass-produced wants and likes. So are you your own person, or are you just no longer a humble and a God-fearing person? It's not the individuality that you have strengthened by saying no to your faith or no to your parents. But in many cases, we've actually compromised those very attributes which will allow us to be our own person in the future. Because our parents, when they tell us something, it's often frustrating in the time. But it is meant with sincerity to try to help us become successful and become independent and be able to succeed in our decision making. They're not ma'soom, but at least the intention is to help us succeed. When we turn our back on their guidance, that in many cases the people that we turn to, maybe they're more hip, they're more in line with the times, but they don't have our best interests at heart. And so our Imam says, don't seek the pleasure of those people. لا يغرك سخط من رضاه الجور. Don't seek the pleasure of those people who are angered at what is good and pleased at what is evil. Don't seek their pleasure and don't be afraid of their anger. Don't flee from the disapproval and then seek the approval of those people. Man ridahul jawr. Their pleasure will be injustice. And one other very beautiful teaching of our 9th Imam, he said, if a person is absent from something, but they are pleased with it, then it is as if they are present. And if somebody is present at something and they are displeased by it, then it is as if they are absent. This is a very, very profound statement. Man hadara amran فكره فكأنما غاب عنه ومن غاب عن أمر فرضي فكأنما حضره. Where you want to be is where you are. And so if I am thinking about gatherings where God is being disobeyed, I might never commit the sin. I might not even be present where the sin is being committed. But because my thinking and my mind is in that direction, it is as if I am there and I am doing that terrible act. And if my mental life, my spiritual life is somewhere else, somewhere good, then no matter where I might be, no matter how far I might be, I am counted by God among those who are present. Just imagine, how did people communicate before we had all these means of communication? Sometimes we feel like if we lose service for a few hours, or our battery dies, or we're not able to communicate with our friends for a few days, I haven't heard from them forever. I don't get any time with my friends. But there was a time not long ago when communication with loved ones and with friends would often take months or years. People would have to travel for trade, for studies, for other reasons, and they wouldn't see their parents. They wouldn't see their relatives, they wouldn't see their loved ones, maybe even their wife and kids, for months or even for years. And yet they had a greater closeness and less of a complaint than we do if we are separated from our contacts for a few hours. Do you know why that is? It's because our imagination and our soul is shallow. And so if I don't get the stimulation immediately, then I feel like I'm all alone. With all of the means of communication and transportation that we have more contacts than people at any time in history. We know more names and numbers than people at any time in history, but we are more lonely. Because our soul is shallow. Our imagination is underdeveloped. And this is part of what the Imam is referring to. That if you are living in your mind in a certain environment, then you are there. If you are living with God and the followers of God and the people of God, then no matter where you are, you're not going to make excuses for sinfulness by saying, well, I live in a secular society. Because your imagination and your soul will be deep and not shallow. And you will be able to say no to that evil gathering. And that is why it is so important for us to be present in these times of commemoration of our Imams. Don't take the easy way out and say that I am busy, or say that I'll catch a majlis on YouTube. If you are able to make it, then come. Because this is how we affirm that we are there with Ahlul Bayt in their happiness. That we don't just want to be connected to our social circle and our friends, but we want to be connected with God and the people of God, and to follow in their footsteps and learn from them, so that our soul becomes deep and not shallow. And even if we have hardships, then we have an inner illumination. Imam Muhammad Jawad was summoned by the Caliph Mu'tasim from Medina to Baghdad, away from his loved ones, away from his followers. And for almost a year, he was put in various forms of prison and house arrest, as Mu'tasim the Caliph tried to find a way to make the people love Ahlul Bayt less. How many tortures did Imam Jawad suffer? How many different forms of hardship did Imam Jawad suffer when the poison that martyred him came from his own family, and those who should have been his protectors and his guardians? They were the ones watching to see if the poison had taken effect. And they observed as the Imam's color changed and as his body weakened. And then they congratulated one another that we have eliminated a threat to our power and our kingdom. Our Imam addressed them. And he said that you think that you have succeeded in your diabolical scheme, but know that Allah will strike you with poverty and weakness after you schemed against the Imam of your time. It reminds me of the words of Imam Hussein to Umar ibn Sa'ad on the day of Karbala, that, "O Umar ibn Sa'ad, you are fighting me because you want to have power and you want to have the wealth of Ray at your disposal. Know that you shall not taste of that blessing, because there is no power, there is no strength to those who fight against the command of Allah and the appointed Imam given by Allah for humanity." Imam Hussein stood on the plains of Karbala and gave the same message that Imam Jawad gave in the castle of Mu'tasim al-Abbasi. And although our 9th Imam was martyred, there is no martyrdom and no suffering comparable to that of our Imam, because he was surrounded in the words of our 4th Imam, "O my father, 30,000 enemy soldiers drew their swords and marched towards you, encouraging one another. Shimr would call out, 'You go forth and strike the Imam.' And as they drew their weapons, those who were afar cast their spears, drew their arrows, and launched their arrows, threw their stones. There was only one target for thousands of weapons, and that was the person of Imam Hussein, the only grandson of a messenger of Allah on the face of the earth at that time. Lady Zainab watched as Imam Hussein was attacked. She watched as he was martyred, and as the Imam prostrated his head on the ground to give his final dhikr and affirmation of his belief in Allah, Lady Zainab towards the heavens turned her head and said that, "Oh my grandfather, oh Rasulullah, what is this sight that I am witnessing? My beloved Hussein, your grandson, is being martyred before my eyes, and there is nothing that I can do to help. I call out to you, wa Muhammadan وعليا هذا حسين بالعراء إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون صدق الله العلي العظيم. It is now time for Salatul Maghrib. Let us conclude this majlis with a prayer from Allah to accept it from us and from the sponsors. And may Allah guide us to always follow in the footsteps of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam. For our marhumin, let us recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله